to everyone world over, wherever you are. We extend you a very warm welcome for having joined us this evening for a very special program which we bring to you every Saturday in the evening. And today is the 257th webinar. That's on 24th of October. Today is a very auspicious day. First of all, happy Ashtami to everybody. Happy Durga Puja and happy Navratras today, 8th day of this particular festivity. We are privileged this evening, ladies and gentlemen. We have got with us Swami Atmashraddhananda, who's the Honorable Secretary, Ramakrishna Mission, Ashram, Kanpur. And we have our worthy advisor, SUDIP MAJUMDAR for our chamber. And ladies and gentlemen, we extend you a very hearty welcome on Swami Vivekananda's teachings for education and youth empowerment. Now the new education policy 2020, which has been announced by Government of India. So today we are going to focus on education for youth, the goal and the way forward, what we have got. So let me just share some slides initially with all of us so that world over, wherever you're joining in different time zones, somebody is in the morning, somebody is in the afternoon, somebody is in the evening. So wherever you are, some of us, we are joining program every day and some of us are joining for the first time today. So we wish to bring everybody on the common frequency. I'll quickly share certain slides because there's a paucity of time, so I'll go that way. Now, International Chamber for Service Industry since 1994, we are with the non-resident Indians, and during pandemic, we are focusing on making education relevant. We all understand this is a difficult time, difficult moments. Please take care of yourself. India always believes in Vasudev Kutumbakam. All of us, we are together. Our chamber is in your service from morning 9 a.m. till evening 9 p.m. All of us, we are together. This is the complete week program of our chamber. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we are with the youth empowerment strategies. Friday, we have got water management strategies and conservation. And Saturday evening, we have got Swami Vivekananda's teaching for education and youth empowerment. And immediately after this program at 6:30, we have got a program with the Ministry of Ayush. That's on Ayurveda, Yoga, Meditation, Naturopathy. Sunday morning, you have got Srimad Bhagavad Gita and India's Upanishad. Sunday evening at 3 p.m., you have got India ASEAN series. And Sunday evening, the last program, that is at 5 p.m., that is micro, small, and the medium enterprise. Ladies and gentlemen, during pandemic, we got to get back to the basics of life. Take care of your food, take care of your health, and take care of your education, all of us. We extend you a very warm welcome this evening. Whatsoever human mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Let's get together, all of us. We are privileged this evening. We have got Swami Atmashraddhananda, the Honorable Secretary, Ramakrishna Mission, Ashram, Kanpur. Swamiji joined the Ramakrishna Monastic Order way back in 1989 and he was ordained as a monk in 1999. He is a former editor of the Vedanta Kesari, the English monthly published from Sri Ramakrishna Math, Mylapore, Chennai. He has edited, authored, and translated a couple of books on education, Indian culture, and teachings of Ramakrishna Vivekananda. He was the spiritual mentor of Vivekananda Study Circle, IIT Madras for 12 years, and presently conducts weekly meditation classes for Vivekananda Samiti IIT Kanpur. He is the secretary of Ramakrishna Mission, Ashram, Kanpur since October 2018. I would request our honorable advisor, Sri Sudip Majumdar, to say a few words on this particular program, and thereafter, ladies and gentlemen, we will start today's evening. So with these words, I extend a very hearty welcome to Swamiji, and I request Sudip Majumdar to kindly take on the center stage and to take the proceedings further.
Thank you, Dr. Gulshan Sharma ji. On this very auspicious day of Maha Ashtami, I pray to the Almighty Mother to bless us all with good health, prosperity, peace, and wellness. Wish you all a very happy Durga Puja and Dashera, and may good always prevail over the evil. Very good evening to all the viewers across the globe, and welcome to this webinar series on relevance of Swami Vivekananda's teachings in today's education and for youth empowerment under Making Education Relevant program organized by ICSI. On behalf of everybody, I would like to thank ICSI for this noble initiative. I extend my pranam to the speaker for the evening, Reverend Swami Atmashraddhananda, who would be speaking on the topic Education for Youth, the Goal and the Way, according to Swami Vivekananda. Noted philanthropist and author Tony Robbins said, setting goals is the first step in turning the invisible into visible. Let us try to understand why is it so, or what happens if the goals are not set. Well, if goals are set, it helps us to focus. It weeds out our unwanted efforts and idle movement. Setting a goal helps us to measure and track our progress. It helps us to stay motivated. It helps us to beat procrastination. Setting a goal helps to achieve more than planned, and it helps us to determine what we want in life. A sculptor has a clear idea about what he wants to shape out of a marble. Similarly, a painter knows what he is going to paint. But a teacher has no clear idea about the goal of his teachings. This is so because one is not clear about the goal of education. The defect of the present day education is that it has no definite goal to pursue. If you ask a student, what is your goal? The common response is a confused one, representing their state of mind. The best most would say is, I want a good job, earn money, and lead a better life. Well, you might say, see, he has a goal and knows his way. Let me give you some very common examples. A friend of mine did his BCom and is now earning money as a software programmer. Another friend who studied medicine is now selling insurance. A computer engineer friend of mine is running a food chain business. You will find similar examples if you look around. Then you have another types of cases. Dhirubhai Ambani, who did not have a great formal education, left behind a legacy which is unmatched. A kachori seller in Jaipur, selling kachoris from a thela, earned enough money to build a four-storied house in Jaipur. There are many such examples again. One may earn even without getting formal education. Hence, earning cannot be the goal of education. Be it the education system, the teachers, or the taught, nobody knows what is the goal of education. And if you do not know the goal, then how will you find the way? Even before the goals are set, one needs to define the goal. Only then one can choose a path to achieve the goal. To understand the goal of education, one therefore needs to understand what is education. Swami Vivekananda said, education is the manifestation of the perfection already in man. He also said, goal of education. He set the goal of education saying, education must provide life building, man making, character making assimilation of ideas. The ideal of this type of education would be to produce an integrated person, one who has learned how to improve his intellect, purify his emotions, and stand firm on moral virtues and unselfishness. Vivekananda strongly recommended all round development of human beings. In one of his lectures, he expressed the desire that all men were so constituted that in their minds, all these elements of philosophy, mysticism, emotion, and work are equally present in full. That is the ideal, my ideal of the perfect man. Interestingly, UNESCO in its report Learning, published in 1972, while defining the aim of education, echoed the same idea. It read, the physical, the intellectual, emotional, and ethical integration of the individual into a complete man is a broad definition of the fundamental aim of education. Well, with these words, I would now like to invite our speaker for the evening, Reverend Swami Atmashraddhananda, to enlighten us on the topic Education for Youth, the Goal and the Way, according to Swami Vivekananda. Swamiji, the stage is there for you, please.
Thank you, Sudeep, and thank you, Dr. Gulshan, for your very inspiring and very thoughtful introduction. I shall begin now by first offering my pranams to Swami Vivekananda. I will chant a verse in praise of Swamiji, which is composed by his brother disciple, Swami Ramakrishna. Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. I bow down to Swami Vivekananda, who was the very ocean of pure joy born out of Viveka. To that Swami Vivekananda, who was nothing but man of pure intellect, we all seek his guidance. We are here this evening sharing some thoughts and inviting people to think on those thoughts on what is education. Swami Vivekananda and the idea of youth. How education, youth, and Swami Vivekananda can be viewed together. Generally, Swami Vivekananda is viewed by many people as a very great spiritual teacher whose teachings have been reverberating into the world of spirituality, religion, culture, Indian nationalism, Indian cultural renaissance for past 120 years. And the fact is that it will go on for a very, very long time, because such was the depth of his knowledge. And many people also view him as a great saint, which is also true. He was not just a thinker, but a great sage who lived his life, who was an example of what he was teaching. But there's another side to Swami Vivekananda's teachings, which is, or his personality as from a larger perspective, that is his special emphasis on education. Swamiji was an educationist. This was recognized by UNESCO about 15 years back. And before that, they thought they had others from India as educationists, like Aurobindo Ghosh or Rabindranath Tagore. Their thoughts were considered as a guiding principle for education. But then 15 years back, Swamiji was also included because of his very original contribution to the thinking about education. So we'll discuss some of his thoughts on education, and we'll discuss in perspective of youth. Why youth? Education is a very broad perspective. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, as long as I live, so long do I learn. Which means it's a lifelong process. You never come to say, yes, now I have really completed my education, because learning is a lifelong process. But it is very, very important that education should be emphasized when a person is young. We all know this. We relate youth or younger stage of our life with education. We say when you are young, you should go to school, you should go to college, and you should learn. So there is an interconnection between the two. Let's understand what is youth. Physically speaking, youth is a stage of our life when we are full of energy, when we are full of ideas, when we are full of emotions. From a neuroscience angle, youth is when our nervous system is very supple, when the nervous system is able to be bent in any way that we wish it to bend, particularly the brain circuits. So whatever we learn when we are very young, it stays with us for a very long time. In fact, it makes us. So youth is a time when we should learn the right thing. If we learn the wrong thing in the youth, we should not blame if the misery and disorganized things happen in our life later on. So youth, for instance, one thing which the psychologist says that by the age of 10 or 12, a young boy should learn to postpone his immediate happiness and do the work given at hand. If he does not learn this, he would be, as he grows up, be so full of procrastination and so undependable that it would be difficult for him to take up any work and complete it to its logical conclusion. So when he is young, even right before the age of 10 or 12, when homework is given to him, he must learn to postpone his cricket playing or watching TV or playing something and rather focus on the work that has been given to him. Because if he does not postpone his immediate happiness, he will be caught by his inner desires or likes and dislikes so much, his moral standard will come down. So this is one example how neuroscience perspective, youth is very important period that we must learn the right thing. Now look at the youth. Youth is, as we said, is a period of development, is a period of growth. And definitely when something is growing, something is developing, it must be given a guidance. Like a house, when it is being constructed, a small little decision by the architect and a small little decision by the mason or the engineer could change the way the house is built up. For instance, if a big building is built and there is no proper foundation made, proper digging done, we know it's going to be weak. Or the cement that is used is of not the right quality, or the whatever construction constituents are not of right quality. We know it's going to make a big difference in the quality of the building. In the same way, when youth or when the young boy is growing, if he does not receive the quality education, quality attention, or quality guidance, it is likely that when he grows up, we will turn back and say, what kind of education did he receive? We start blaming his parents, we start blaming his school teachers. We have many things to blame about, but let's consider what the whole situation is. So youth, we know it is a time, if we take it very chronologically, it's a time from starting from teenage till the age of 25 or so. So chronologically, he becomes a semi-youth, so to say, beginning with when he was, say, 13 onwards. But then he's also very confused because he's growing, his body parts are growing, his whole system is now becoming adult. So he is also confused because so many new hormones are released by the nature into his body, which makes him feel odd. He doesn't know whether he is a little baby or whether he's a grown-up. And I'm speaking of a teenager. And he is also very soft. He can be hurt even for small things. When I was in Chennai, we had a gardener who once did not come for many days. So then we happened to ask him what was the reason. He told that he had a young son who was just some 17 years. And somewhere he had seen in his maybe outing or through his friends or on something, a bike. And he wanted to buy that bike. And the bike would cost anything between 70 to 80,000 rupees. And the father's income was 8,000 rupees per month. Now this man said, bhai, he told his son, please wait. The son wouldn't listen. Finally, because of his intense this thing, he could not restrain himself. The boy killed himself. Imagine this. Just because he could not get the motorbike which he wanted. It means his development had not taken place. So this is one of the issues. Today we have one of the issues that is youth doing a lot of self-killing across India or across the world. Because there are various reasons for that. But one reason is definitely that emotionally they are very weak. So emotional component is a very important part of education. as in the beginning, Sudip was mentioning about how there is a complete picture of education that we must all have. So unfortunately, we have somehow, for whatever reason, we have become too much focused on the intellectual side or development of our IQ, as we call it, as the sole purpose of education. But we need to relook at the whole thing. Even though a person may have very high IQ, what really he finally turns to accomplish is not how much IQ he has, but other aspects of his personality, other aspects of his whole intelligence, which are very important. For instance, his emotional stability, his ability to work with others, his ability to organize himself, his ability to organize his time, his ability to have faith in himself. All these things are equally important, not just how much of sharpness in intellect he has, or how much the power of memory he has, which is all very important, or how much logical sense he has. So in youth, it's very important that we give a complete picture before the growing young man as to this is the purpose of education. The purpose of education is man-making, Swami Vivekananda said. But today, as someone said the other day, it has become money-making, not man-making. How much money I will be able to make as a result of my education, which means what job, what career I will get, which is important. Career, employment, job are important. We should not underplay their role. But Swami Vivekananda gave a bigger perspective to education, and which is very true. We all have experienced it in our day-to-day life when we read some bad news about a corrupt practice, some scam. We look at what has happened. We'll see many of the people who are involved in this are very educated. They have big degrees. They are very intelligent. They have a very good IQ. So then we naturally we pause and ask ourselves, what is education? He studied so many years in school or college. What did he gain? So this question of a larger perspective of education is not just an intellectual luxury. It is something which is very essential for us to consider. Now, coming to the idea of youth a little more. Youth is also very idealistic. Particularly when he is in his late teens, his idealism grows to its peak, generally speaking. And he expects an ideal society. He expects an ideal father, ideal mother, ideal family, ideal teacher. And when he meets the reality where the ideal is not easily available, he often becomes negative. Or he takes to that sort of philosophy which is harmful to him and harmful to the society in which he lives. So at that time, it's very important that we must teach him this is the way of life. Just the other day, I was listening to a beautiful interview by a well-known philanthropist, and she made a beautiful statement. She said, when I was young, I used to say, why people are like this? Because I used to question the way they used to behave. But as the days go by, I have understood I should not ask why people are like this. I said, this is how people are. People have this good and bad coexist. So I've accepted it. And on my part, I keep doing good to others. Without any expectation, without seeking that he will give me thanks for what I have done or will admire all my goodness, none of that. This is the real crux of education which Swamiji gives through his teachings. If you read his lectures on Karma Yoga, you will find Swamiji is actually speaking of this aspect of our life. In Karma Yoga lectures, he speaks of that we must give without expectation. Now, and this has to be understood very in a bigger right perspective, that what does it mean to give without expectation. So let us consider youth a little further, that he is young, he is full of energy, he is growing, he is developing, and he is seeking a job, he is seeking a career, he is seeking to fulfill an ambition in life. He has an ambition to become, let's say, he wants to become a pilot, or he wants to become an engineer or a doctor. But we also have with him a sense of idealism. But there's a gap between idealism and his ambition, because somehow there are people who say, I can somehow fulfill my ambition at any cost. I don't care for the idealism. And there are people who are so idealistic and they become quite, impractical. We find them, they talk big things, but as Swami Vivekananda says, they do not pay at a very important truth of life. Swamiji calls he calls it as one of the greatest lessons I have learned in life. And what is that lesson Swamiji speaks of? He says to pay as much attention to the means of work as to the end. So they don't pay attention to the end, to the means, and they just keep thinking of the end. Means the instruments, the means, the way, the method in which taking care of small little details. They don't take care of that. They only keep talking of the ideal. They keep talking of the end. So this also is to be avoided, because it is not going to give the right result. And being over ambitious and somehow becoming successful at any cost is also to be avoided 100%, because that will make us so extremely competitive, so extremely selfish, and finally it will make not a man out of us, not a human being out of us. We will lose all moral boundaries. So moral boundaries are very important. So let's think of it. Swami Ranganathanandaji, some of you might have known, he was one of our very revered Swamijis, was the president of the Ramakrishna Mission also, and who is known for his extensive tours, and he spoke on the message of Vedanta and Swami Vivekananda. Once he had come to Bangalore way back in early 90s, and he quoted a book which he had read as a brahmachari, even as a novice, and that inspired him the rest of his life. There the author had mentioned, he had borrowed that book from the University of Mysore. The author had said that we have two things. One is ambition, and there is idealism. Both have got their place. But in terms of putting them in right perspective, ideal should be higher, and all our ambition must be made subservient to idealism. Let me repeat it. We must make all our ambition subservient to idealism, which means idealism means that the sense of truthfulness or unselfishness, of goodness and morality. These things are so inbuilt in us. We cannot simply set them aside. I am here in Kanpur, I am speaking to you. This center of the Ramakrishna Mission was established in 1936 by one of the brother disciples of Swami Vivekananda. His name was Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda was known for his very few teachings, but very pithy statements. So once he was asked, Swamiji, please give us some guidance, some upadesh, please give us. Vivekananda had only a small answer. He said, try to follow whatever you have learned in your primary school. Just think of it. In the primary school, we have been told, speak truth, don't harm others, be cooperative, be helpful. Just follow it. But somehow as we grow, we develop all sorts of ideas, how to circumvent all these principles. And then we come into a situation when we are confused. So it's very important that we go back to the basics. And we must say that how important they are in our life. For example, truthfulness. If you are not truthful, somehow our non-truthfulness, our lies will be discovered sooner or later. So these are all eternal principles. In Patanjali, the great teacher of yoga, says, Etehe sarvabhauma mahavrataha. These are all the universal great vows. What are these? Truthfulness, self-control, or unselfishness, non-violence. These are all considered as mahavratas, the great vows. They all will have to come to us. When we are speaking of youth and education, we must be able to give them an idea as to what really the education is seeking us to give, or what we are seeking from education. Unfortunately, it has become too focused only on job orientation and development of intellect to do that job. In 1972 UNESCO document which SUDIP referred, there is another mention which is made later by again UNESCO. It says what sort of learning we should have. It says, the document says, learning to, first of all, learning to do. We all learn to do things. Earlier days, we learned to do only machines. Now we are doing also a lot of digital work. For instance, you learn how to operate a computer, or how to operate a machine, or how to write an account, or how to write a report. You learn to do things, which is very important for a quality, to become a quality worker. It's very important. But again, just because it is important, it does not mean it is all important. These are the, some of the hard skills we all learn, that we learn to do things. And we must learn to do, which again requires hard work and discipline and learning. Then the UNESCO speaks of another one pillar. It speaks of learning how to be. First is learning to do things, another is learning to be, what to be, what sort of person you are. Being is what? Most of the youth, they think their sense of idealism often comes, many of them, I've met a number of young friends who take their immediate idealism or ideal from the field of sports, the field of films which they see, or some popular figure. And when the popular figure their friends are also speaking of, so they think that's what the ideal is. So they should have the right ideal before them. So learning to be is very important, and being requires that we must have an ideal. And it's no wonder that many people, including the government of India, has paid attention to this fact, and at least officially tried to place before the youth Swami Vivekananda as the ideal before youth. Way back in 1980s, 85, Swami Vivekananda's birthday was declared as the National Youth Day, because he was like a national icon before the youth. So Swami Vivekananda's teachings, his inspiring life, his remarkable personality, that can stand as a wonderful ideal before the youth if they spend some time reading his life and anecdotes from that and teachings. And there are many youth, frankly speaking, who may not be known to us, but in their quiet hours, they do turn to Swamiji's teachings. If they are fortunate enough, they grasp, and they know his teachings are available online also. You can download the complete works and read them. You will see that he is full of vigor, full of self-effort. He says man is the maker of his own destiny. He shows us how our thinking plays an important role in life. He says whatever you think, you will be. If you think negative, negative you will be. If you think positive, positive you will be. If you think you can do something, you can do something. If you think you cannot do it, you cannot do it. Very simple. So Swamiji's these teachings, especially when he makes us feel when we are in a state of, when we are feeling very down, we are feeling frustrated, we are in need of a support, we are in need of a great inspiration, it's kind of loss of vigor, then we turn to his teachings. We find a tremendous shock, a tremendous electric shock coming out of his words. We do not know how this it comes, but it comes. Now these two pillars, UNESCO spoke about education and Swami Vivekananda's teachings. And two more pillars UNESCO added later, and that is learning to learn and learning to live with others. So there are first four pillars of learning. First is learning to do, another is learning to be, third is learning to live with others, and fourth is learning to learn. So learning to live with others, which means our interpersonal interactions. We need education in that also. And these are not just in terms of our family members. They're also in terms of the workplace or the neighbors with which we live, or the shopkeepers with whom we interact, or the bus conductor with whom we meet, or the peon somewhere, or a sweeper somewhere, or an officer or a politician. How do we interact? How do we have that maturity to interact with all of them without compromising on our human values? So this is one thing which we have to learn. And learning to learn is the fourth pillar. Learning to learn. Learning to learn, which means, as I quoted in the beginning, Sri Ramakrishna saying, as long as I live, so long do I learn. I must not put an end to my learning. I was speaking to a remarkable doctor who is in late 70s. And I found he is very tech savvy. He is very good at computers, and he is quite good for his age. He knows quite well how to operate various gadgets and social media. So when I asked him, he said, see, Swamiji, around 10 years back, I read a book which said, if you don't learn how to live with the digital technology, you will become obsolete. So I started learning. This is what Sri Ramakrishna says. As long as you live, so long you have to learn. So youth should not think that, I have finished my education, so my learning is over. In fact, the learning starts after that. You have learned only a small part of education. There is a famous Sanskrit verse which speaks of 4 padas, 4 parts of education. First pada is the education that you receive from going to a teacher. Guru gives you teaching and you learn from that. This is the first pada or first part. Second is you learn it through the textbook. This is the second pada. The Guru is not there. You have got the book. You read from the book. And this is the second pada. Third pada, he calls it sahapatinaha, from your colleagues, from your, those your friends who are studying. You learn things from that. And the fourth pada is kalaha, which means time. You learn through time. So first is teacher, second is your textbooks, third is your classmates, and the fourth is time. So for instance, there is something in Shakespeare that you might have read. It's remarkable, but as you grow in life, as you give an experience, you gain, oh, Shakespeare was so right. Oh, that is what he meant. Or you learn something in mathematics. Then you say, oh, this is what the trigonometry said after 30 years of my learning. So these 4 things are the important things. Now I will, another 5 minutes, I'll wind up. I'll say one important thing, that is placing an ideal before us. There's a small story of a young prince. This prince was very weak. He was not gaining weight, not gaining the growth as he should have. He was, his father was a king of the state. So the father had done all the best vaidyas or the doctors. They had shown, they had given different types of diets, and they have given all kinds of advices to him as to how he can improve. But the boy was no longer gaining. He was not, he was a growing boy, but he was not becoming a full-grown youth. There was some difficulty with him. Then once a wise man came to the palace, and the king expressed his worry to him that my son is like that, he's not growing. The wise man gave him a simple advice. He said, get a statue done of a muscular young man. And it was done. Now, this should be, like an ideally shaped young man. Now take this statue and place it in that boy's that place where he spends most of his time. So he spends his time, let's say, in his room, or there's a courtyard around the room, place it there. It was done. And the wise men said, now nothing else is to be done. You see the miracle, what will happen. And it so happened, after 6 months, there was a remarkable change in the boy's appearance. He was looking more muscular, who was trying to become more healthy and stout. He had not done so with all the advice given by the Vaidyas, was now becoming so. And after a year or two, he was exactly what he himself and what the king wanted him to be so. How did this change happen? That is because of that image, that marble statue that was placed in his room. While going in, going out, he was constantly looking at it. And that slowly inspired him. It entered into his head that he too should become like him. So this is why, this tendency is there among the youth. They take up some picture, maybe the picture of a film hero or heroine or some sportsman, and keep it in their study room. There's a tendency in them. And they think they should become like that. But let's have real heroes before us. I'm not saying that it is wrong to keep a sportsman or some famous person's picture. If it gives you inspiration, fine. But go to the real heroes of life. The people whose life, whose personality, whose struggles, whose ability to overcome all the failures that come in life are much more than whatever little heroes that we see elsewhere. So if you find that hero in any field of life, not particularly that only there should be a spiritual hero, you could keep somebody who is very strong in character, who is very strong in his conviction and is willing to undergo. It could be an ordinary person. It could not be a very well-known person. It could be a grandmother in a house. How she has faced all the problems of a life. Say when the India-Pakistan partition took place, and there was such enormous difficulty which the families who migrated from that part to this part and this part to that part, they faced, and how they built up their life. They're all success stories. Or those who came from what we call as the Bangladesh today. Look at their success stories, personal success stories. So always have some ideal before you. And what should be the ultimate ideal for us? As we said, education is the manifestation of the perfection already in man. So how does this manifestation of perfection take place? Basically, as far as my little understanding goes, it takes place at 3 levels. It takes place at the level of head, then heart and hands. Head, heart and hands, 3H. What are these 3 represent? Head represents our thinking, our power of right thinking, logical thinking, power of deep thinking. It's not just that we should have free thinking, we should have deep thinking. We should go to the very depth of a matter. We should have the right kind of a thinking, clear thinking. This requires training. We read books, we interact with the people whose own intellect is well developed. We take help from them, we interact with them, and we need attention to cultivate the intellect. But then we also have to cultivate our heart. By heart is meant emotions. And these emotions are not about emotion for oneself, that I become very, have a self-pity. We are not speaking of self-pity, because some people think, oh, having emotions means becoming self-pity. No, it's not that. It is how much I can feel for others. Like Swami Vivekananda said, feel, feel, feel. Feel for the poor, feel for others. Now, if you remove the others and the poor and just say feel, 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 which I actually saw a young man doing and started weeping. Oh, we did not mean that you should be just feeling about yourself and become a very emotional wreck. For every small little thing you get hurt, for every small little failure, you become depressed. And then you carry that depression inside and you go on cultivating it by listening to songs, by reciting similarly negative things, or reading the failure stories. What is the need for all that? Let us make ourselves emotionally strong. So this emotional strength is this. Another aspect is I should be able to do something for others. There was this lady who had this trouble in her house, and she was advised by somebody to go and work in a hospital on a free basis once in a week. And she was good in PRO work, and she started doing it. After 6 months, she had no complaints, because she said, my problems are nothing before the problems of the people who come to this clinic to solve themselves. Somebody is down with cancer, somebody is down with diabetes, which is last stage of his life, and here I am healthy, I am thinking so negative about myself. So let's cultivate emotions in a right way. And third thing is hand, which means skillfulness, efficiency. We must be able to coordinate what we think and feel with what we want to do. There should be this harmonious development. Often we fail at this. So I'll not go in more details into this much to say that we should be able to cultivate all the 3 H. This is what the simple meaning of manifestation of the divinity already present, or perfection already present in us. So let's all think about it. Swami Vivekananda, youth and education, they have a deep relationship. Youth require education because that's a time to learn, and that is a time to grow, and there's a time of you are like in a crossroad, whether to go left or right or some other side. So let us choose the right path. For this, ideas from Swami Vivekananda are of a great help, and I'm sure all those who have been listening to this talk, and those who are with whom you discuss these ideas, will find there is much to learn from Swamiji in terms of education, in terms of building of our character, man-making education, and this let us all spend some time over it. So thank you very much. So hereby I conclude my talk. Namaste.
Thank you, Swamiji. It was so inspiring to hear you, and really a great message for the youth. You defined what a youth is. You defined the goal of education, and you also said what should be the way and how the way should be charted out. Very true. I think we don't have much time today. Just to sum it up before I hand over to Dr. Gulshan Sharma ji, the goal of education is well said, well defined. Our reverend speaker, Swami Atmashraddhananda ji, talked about it. Manifestation of the perfection already in man, as said by Swami Vivekananda. And how do we get it? We need to cultivate our willpower. We need to have truthfulness, the very basic things that he said we learned in our primary classes, self-development, and education. One of the goals of education has to be, enabling us to face the struggle of life, so that we are not drained emotionally out, and we are not able to face the tough hardships of life and end up taking away our own life. And the way, as again he described very well, it has to be a man-making education, as said by Swami Vivekananda, a harmonious development of the body, mind, and soul. Character building education is one of the things on the way that has to be there. Fulfillment of swadharma, acquisition of strength, mental and physical, developing the religious attitude, the freedom of growth, and the social cultural development. These are the ways which take us to the goal, and they all come under the broad spectrum of education. Again, quoting what Maharaj just said, there is no age of learning. As long as we live, so long do we learn. With these words, I hand over the proceedings of the day to Dr. Gulshan Sharma ji. I thank Swamiji for his so inspiring words, and we really hope the youth and everybody who are hearing, who have heard him speak, will really get inspired. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Swamiji. Thank you very much, Sudeep ji. It was wonderful to have for the global this fraternity, because our chamber is trying to link the non-resident Indians youth with the soil of India, and particularly the new education policy 2020, which has come. where Swamiji mentioned the journey from IQ to EQ that has already been incorporated. And he mentioned about the four important pillars of the UNESCO also, and particularly the Sanskrit four padas when he mentioned education you receive from teacher, education you receive from books, education you receive from colleagues, and education you receive from time. Time is something very important. And particularly something very interesting, Swamiji, you mentioned, let's understand the real heroes of life. You know, that is something very important. I think our younger generation today, when Swamiji has mentioned, start understanding and realizing, because this entire series is making education relevant. And then finally, when he talked about head, heart, and hands, all three are so important to all of us. It's wonderful to understand logical thinking, deep thinking, emotion, and of course, the new government now, where with the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship has also come. अपने हाथों से भी कार्य करना होगा और अपने हाथों से जितना काम हो सके उतना अच्छा है. Hands की भी बातचीत की. And finally, when you mention, I think I personally feel, and everybody feels, when you say feel, 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 I think we have felt you, we have felt you, we have felt you, and we have felt you, Swamiji. It was so good. It was so good. It was so touching. Thank you very much for sparing your most valuable time and to grace the occasion. So, ladies and gentlemen, world over, wherever you are, green morning, green afternoon, green evening. Let's stop green everything we